One of the biggest problems that we still see in payroll is still largely an afterthought. It's not the first place organizations are going to have a conversation about a strategic move.
Welcome to Beyond Borders New York Edition, a Multiplier talk series that brings together global first thought leaders and entrepreneurs to discuss the future of work. In this episode, discover how AI and modern systems are transforming global payroll.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael. I'm with Multiplier, and welcome to our session on borderless payroll. Today, we're here to talk to Pete, who's an advisor at GXT Advisors, and I'll let him kind of do his intro because he probably do a better job pitching than I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm a long time industry analyst and professional researcher, strategic advisor who works closely studying this marketplace and working with the vendors like yourself in the market to bring about the best solutions possible. So, really excited to be here today.
Well, we're definitely happy to have you, and hopefully this could be a good conversation about the industry today and how we can improve employment globally from a pay perspective. So first question I just want to start off with, and we'll kind of dig into it a little bit deeper, but what are the challenges you're seeing for payroll teams or just from payroll in general in these companies when it comes to hiring internationally?
Yeah, well, look, I think that one of the things that we've kind of come to now in payroll is this realization that payroll always knew, but maybe the business didn't always realize is how complicated, how important, and how strategically impacting payroll is and can be. And I think more than ever, that's really reared its head because of compliance, right? I mean, it's really raging. I was talking a little bit earlier about, last year we saw something like 50% of the polls, 50% of the global population wins the polls, right? There's going to be change that comes with that. That compliance is going to continue to move forward and continue to rage. And I think that's created a lot of angst, right? When you think about the maturation that payroll's gone through, it hasn't really evolved in terms of technology quite the way some of the other back office operations have, right? It's been a little bit starved for innovation. Now we're getting that innovation and it's converging with that compliance strain, but also just the idea that as an employer today, why should my opportunity be limited by the 50-mile or 100-mile radius of the city that I live in? We don't have enough talent often in our backyards, and we don't often even have enough talent in our own countries. So why shouldn't we be able to open up and be able to tap into that? And I think that's a beautiful thing, right? But it's also creating a lot of complexity for businesses, right? To go after that opportunity has compounded the complexity of that. So I think there's just a huge sort of convergence of things happening right now that are bringing about, these opportunities for payroll to evolve and businesses to see the opportunity amongst payroll and what payroll can do.
And how are execs and the leadership kind of seeing this, like, thought leaders like yourself, how are they reacting to these new topics, these new challenges when it comes to global employment? Well, are they receptive? Are you seeing some resistance? What challenge?
I think that most employers want to compete and do the best they possibly can, right? I think a lot of them just don't fundamentally know how. And I think a lot of them have certainly gotten better at certain things, whether that's talent attraction, whether that's, HR strategically, whatever element of that you might see. But I think that there's a lot of folks that I think the idea of a multinational company being big companies only has gone away. And the smaller companies and the middle market companies are also looking to get in the game, tap into that talent that's available to them and compete with those bigger guys. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunities, both ways for everyone, right? To get out there and do that. Have these executives woken up for that? I think they have out of maybe reactionary things. Hey, we need to expand, we need to grow, whatever. But are they thinking about it from an infrastructure up and reworking HR and payroll? Probably not as fast as they need to, and I hope we'll see more of that.
So are you saying basically that it's really starting at the talent level first for them, that they need to fill these roles, and then they're kind of working backwards?
Yeah. I think every company has a talent problem, right? We've got a skills gap in the world. We don't have enough people being born anymore, right? In every country. I think employers need to have the agility available to them, right? To tap into the talent wherever that might be, whether that's 50 miles away or 5,000 miles away. And that's what I love about the solutions like global employment solutions like EOR that have come online, because they've become not just an org agility enabler for the business, but also a human opportunity enabler. And now you're bringing skill and opportunity together with people and talent. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity for organizations to create that agility to solve their strategic needs, but also to hopefully empower someone in another place, right? That might not have that opportunity any other way. So
you're kind of telling this story that like talent, this ask for talent comes in, recruiters get paid a huge commission to bring those people. And then after that, it's kind of lays on payroll to figure out how to solve this problem. So what challenges are you facing, or what you're seeing from, like, what are you seeing from the payroll teams out there about hiring globally? What challenges are they working with to implementing strategies?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems that we still see in payroll is still largely an afterthought. It's not the first place organizations are going to have a conversation about a strategic move, whether that's hiring or entering a country as part of growth, or whether that's maybe making a merger or acquisition, right? We're still fundamentally treating payroll as an arm's length organization, right? That's sort of after the fact. And I think what you're finding is that a lot of organizations have woken up to the fact that, number one, that those payroll leaders are actually business leaders who have a point of view, who also happen to maybe curate the most richest and valuable data set that is often overlooked in their organization. And I think there's an opportunity for executives now to look at that payroll as a business partner, a strategic partner, to help them facilitate these decisions. And that comes with risk, right? And that's where I think payroll can make its biggest impact, is de-risking the business, right? Helping them perform whatever that is, whether that's a global expansion, whether that's a growth initiative in their own country, whether that's maybe shrinking and consolidating things. Payroll needs to be able to flex and be infrastructure ready, I guess you could say, future ready to handle what the business needs to do. And I think that's the ultimate outcome of payroll is also really de-risking the business, but also giving them that agility to be able to be pivoted and have the data and insights to make good decisions. So,
and like, what are some things that the payroll leadership could do to maybe facilitate that conversation proactively with execs? Because I feel like execs have other things maybe on their mind first before, figuring out what their payroll or payment strategy is. Still wonders.
Agreed. Yeah, look, and we are seeing that. I do some research every year called the Payroll Perfection Confidence Index. And one of the things in there that we're finding is there is a market for I think it's a 3 or 4x ROI return when payroll and the executive leadership team have a dialogue, when they have a direct line with each other. So I think there's been an understanding that payroll needs to be, we talk about payroll being brought to the table. I think there's an awakening around payroll's engagement. When do we engage payroll? And the answer is becoming more and more proactively, thankfully. What we need to do, though, is there's still largely an ignorance for what payroll actually does and how much. I have this thing called the payroll iceberg I've shown, where, on the top, you'll have executives and leaders will see reports, and maybe they'll see some check, obviously their check, and maybe some complaints. If there's complaints, no one's calling up the CEO going, the payroll department really killed it this week. They got all of my pay to be on time. There's just this expectation of that. But below the waterline, there's this world of complexity that payroll is dealing with that largely, I don't know that the businesses often understand the danger they're in, and payroll isn't in a position to actually hold off and orbit the business and shield it from risk. And so when they're not enabled with tech and they're not enabled with engagement, right, leadership and championing by executives, they're lost. And then they become an after effect, right? And so what I think you're seeing is executives are coming around the idea that payroll needs to be very, very, very technology forward and digitized, just like everything else. But it also needs to be deeply integrated in the HR and business strategy so that they can help the business execute against its strategic plans. I'll give you a great example. I like to look at payroll as an F1 race car, right? If you pretend, let's just say, for example, the race car is a business, right? You have the best technology, you've got the best pit crew, you've got the best driver, all the best talent, you have the best engine, you've done everything possibly right? And if you've ever listened to McLaren CEO talk, I got to see him speak one time. A millimeter of metal shaved off of something can be the difference between first place or second place, right? And what is interesting about that is if you analogize that like a company, right? What we've done historically is we've gone out there and we've invested in all these great race cars and we've got all this great technology and great talent, and we've put it on ill-fitting tires. And if you've ever had a really nice car, I bought a Cadillac one time years ago. It was a used Cadillac. I was very proud of this car, right? I got it and it rode terrible. And I went back to the guy and I was like, what is wrong with this car? And the guy said to me, he said, there's nothing wrong with this car. He said, you just have cheap tires. If you put Michelin's or Pirelli's, it'll ride like a Cadillac. Well, I did. And guess what? It rode like a Cadillac and I was very happy. So that's payroll. If you analogize payroll as the tires, Now you can handle and pivot around the track. Now you can win. And the way that you're going to win in the future, I think, is being flexible, being scalable, but being able to exercise the data that you have, which payroll is curating tremendous data. Pair that with other data, business data, operations data, external data. Now you suddenly have this view into the around the corner, right? You're avoiding obstacles. You're pivoting and nudging in the right directions as and when you need to, and you're not perishing, right? That's org agility. That's what payroll's ultimate ROI really is. And that's what I think and I hope that businesses are waking up to. And those that are investing in payroll as a center of expertise. They're bringing them to the table, and they're allowing, or not allowing, they're creating an environment where payroll is leading the business and not payroll being led by the business. And that's a huge difference.
Yeah,
it's a competitive advantage now.
Yeah, and I definitely feel that, like, as I've seen numerous transformations happen, even from the small business end all the way up to enterprise, like, I think that there's a lot of even unknown, or even maybe they're unknown benefits that come from these transformations. Yeah. Like, I think just having peace of mind as workers that you don't have to worry about your pay is a huge advantage in creating that trust and purpose with your employees. Yeah. And I think a lot of times mistakes are often not viewed as critical unless it's the executive. I do always love, though, that executives tend to have their own payroll person, right, and the executive company. Yeah. So it's like the ratio is like 1 to 2,000 employees, and they have like 1 to 10.
Yes.
So yeah, I think sometimes it can feel a bit out of whack, the level of support the workers get when it comes to their pay and benefits, and it's really important to get it right.
Yeah, I have something I call the 5 pillars of modern payroll, which is really, for years we've whipped HR and payroll and said, look, be more strategic. Well, what does that really mean and look like? So I created these 5 pillars, and it's rooted in it being a compliance center of expertise. And off of that is 4 other things. 1 is helping the business facilitate access to talent anywhere. It's not payroll's job, but it is something they have to help execute. But the same thing too with the modern pay experience. I say, payroll has to facilitate that, but payroll and the pay experience is not the same thing. Payroll is payroll. The modern pay experience is also payroll, but it's also total rewards and comp, and the trust I have for the results, and the trust I have for how equitable and inclusive what I'm being paid is, and fair, and being able to be well with that information, so that it's all very relevant.
And with like what's happening in Europe with the EU and all this pay transparency legislative change, that's going to kind of push these changes to be more open to workers. I think you'll see more of this requirement be forced. And I think it actually will benefit the businesses too. But I know that's a
it's a tricky space, but you're absolutely right. I think people are demanding more clarity, right, and more transparency and more truth to what we're doing. And that goes down to the payroll results. If I can't trust the results, am I going to trust that you're doing the right thing, even though you might be trying to? But if you're putting out the wrong results, it's going to give the wrong.
Yeah, it shows a lack of care.
It does. Yeah.
Kind of to move to a slightly different question, as you look at this broadly from a global standpoint, what are the different experiences or expectations you see in the global market from these different countries and regions when it comes to their pay? What are the things that are more stringent, more, I don't mean from a compliance perspective, I mean from like the worker expectations.
Yeah, look, look, the rules of payroll are the same, right? For every state, for every locality, for every country, it's exactly the same for every business in that country, right? You know what the rules are. What you choose to do around those rules to make it accommodating for your sector or for your business or whatever you need to do to compete is totally up to the employer within the law, right? But I think you also have to remember that you have 5 generations coming to the workforce, right? You have 5 different lenses of what the expectations are for the work, for employment, for pay, for all of those things, right? And so what I think is really interesting about that is you can't offer a one-size-fits-all experience anymore. It's really just not viable, right? It doesn't work. It doesn't work for everyone. And I think employees are coming to the workspace now and saying, well, wait a minute. What do you mean you don't have a mobile app? What do you mean you don't have real-time information on my pay? What do you mean you don't have on-demand pay? What do you mean you don't have these things that the other employer I has, right? So there's almost this pull from the bottoms up of a commercial pull, like, hey, my experience in my personal life is X. Why is my experience at work so awfully outdated? and they should match, right? And by the way, I want complete control over every element of my work and my pay, right? I want to control the timing. I want to control where. I want to control whatever. And I think that boils down to flexibility enablers. And those flexibility enablers are really what employees want, right? If there's plenty of studies you can look out there. It's not about paying them more. It's more about giving them the flexibility to choose and create that experience. And so I think employees are wanting to shape a pay experience that is very inclusive, very trustworthy, very real time, very tech enabled, and ultimately delivered to them in a way that is aligning to what their construct is for what they're trying to achieve, whether it's personally, professionally. I joke around. My daughter, she's a I think they call them geriatric millennials now, right? She's a 30-year-old millennial. I saw that recently in an article. I thought it was really funny, and I joke that she comes to work to give her dog a better life, right? And she laughs, but like pet insurance is important to her, and time to go and take her dog out during the day, that's important to her. And someone else might think that's insignificant, but that shapes her experience at the workplace. I think we all have to look at that and know what makes our employees tick and say, what are the little things I can do to make your life a little bit easier so that you can come to work more productive? And pay is just rooted in all the reasons we one commonality in every human being, we work for money, right?
Yeah.
And we want to be able to trust that it's going to be there. We need it for our families. We need it for our livelihoods, our goals. And I think we should all have great experience of that.
So your perspective on this is kind of like, it doesn't really matter the country. Like the core needs are pretty universal, dependent, no matter where you are.
Timely, accurate, compliant, trustworthy payroll is what every payroller around the world is doing. And they're really managing risk, right? They're de-risking the business and trying to perform just an credible task, often with not the best support, not the best technology. And they're trying to do it in a way that is as near perfect. What other profession do we, other than maybe surgeons, do we ask complete perfection and demand it, right? And they pull it off darn near every time, right? It's amazing. So
yeah, and hopefully with better, I mean, the surgeons have better tooling, right? Yeah. So I guess this is sort of a two-part question, but what do you see as like the major challenges that are out there for these payroll leaders today and how they process payroll and operate payroll in general? And then like, what are you seeing as like the consequences from those challenges? How are you seeing those manifest into problems for those organizations?
Yeah. Well, I mean, candidly, I think one of the biggest problems we still have in the world is respect, right? We're not respecting our payroll folks the way we should. They are tremendous business professionals that are operating on a level that is on par with lawyers and accountants with the compliance complexity, right? Even Australia is going that way of credentialing one like that. But the second part, I think, is that the other part, the biggest problem I see for payroll, just fundamentally, inherently, and right now, is the rules keep changing, right? Compliance is changing it feels like by the hour, by the day, right? I talked about the 50% of the population that went to the polls. We're seeing that pop already, right? Here in America, the new presidency, right? They brought a lot of new changes. Incumbents will bring changes and promise things. That is going to come with more complexity, right? And so I think that, the rules are going to always keep changing, right? That's just the way it is. That's the inherent nature of payroll. I think that's where the tech comes in, and the savior, if you will, to payroll is tech. They have really needed technology for years, but the problem is, even with that technology, it's only going to take them so far. You've got to engage them. The C-suite has to look at them beyond just these bookkeeping processors that they've been sort of housed under, and say, these are business leaders who are holding together and running the only process, regardless of the business, the only process that will get me put in prison. Hard stop. It's the only thing. Accounting in a publicly traded company, under certain circumstances, you're going to get in trouble. But payroll will fundamentally get the doors locked and the executives put in jail if they don't do their job right. If you don't lose all the employees first. And that's serious. And I don't know that a lot of folks know that. So payroll is dealing with massive complexity, starvation for innovation, and let's don't forget, we're losing people, right? They're not immune to the talent crunch, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of employers now start to look out and get help, right? They're going and getting managed services because they can step into that innovation, retain their investments, and supplement capabilities that they maybe don't have or don't want to build in house.
Yeah, I want to get to the talent, kind of the talent exit that's happening in house payroll, but just real quick to follow up, like, You even look at like the compliance changes coming with these new tax changes around overtime and tips. It's going to be extremely complex to implement that organizationally. And what's going to be challenging is you go, well, that's a payroll problem. No, in my experience, 10 to 15% of workers work some level of overtime every month. You're going to see a lot of challenges explaining when that is taxable versus not. And when people hear taxable, they'll think, oh, this is just, I should pay no tax on this, but it's just federal income tax. It's not all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of challenges.
That's one change.
That's one change. Yeah. And then, by the way, I'm sure some states will copy it.
Exactly.
Then what states are consistent? So it's going to get very, very complex. And I think as we've gotten to be more technology forward and things have got faster, our legislation has gotten more complex over time, at least in my experience. And so it will be interesting to see how people receive those changes. I think there'll be a lot of confused people in January. Well, but that's okay.
Hopefully this is where AI is going to help, right?
Yeah.
A lot of that explaining, right? I mean, we're using AI to do a lot of that now. And I think that you're absolutely right. This is going to create a very big customer service inquiry situation for payroll and HR to be answering a lot of questions about what does this mean in my paycheck.
Back to the talent gap. Payroll, I mean, I haven't seen any stats recently. I work very anecdotally in this space. So we may have some stats on
I do.
Okay, great. I would love to hear them. But like everyone I know is retiring out of the payroll space.
Yeah.
I'm like young and I'm not young. But like but I'm young in this space. And I think we're seeing, I'm sure you've heard it, that like people will get provided years to extend, bonuses to not retire because you can't replace these people. What are you seeing as the challenges of finding the new talent? How are you seeing companies solve this problem, and what are some of the stats you're seeing around that?
So look, payroll. Let's talk payrolls just specifically, right? I run the Payroll Profession Confidence Index every year. We just ran it last year for the first time. We just run it again this year. We normally hit about 600 to 700 people, payroll stakeholders. That could be processors, leaders, managers, directors of shared services, DPs of finance, whatever. And we ask them, it's a sentiment-based analysis. It goes deep into their relationships and how payroll is being engaged. And in that, what we find is in the demographics, and this is the scary part, right? And look, every industry is having a shrinkage, right? We're losing people everywhere. We're not birthing people nearly at the rate we were, and we're not skilling people nearly as fast. And let's be honest, HR and payroll was never a first stop destination. From most of us coming out of school, we found our way here, thankfully. And thankfully, many people have stayed. But here's the scary part. We sampled 700 plus people, 31 countries and 5 continents. So it's a pretty good global sample, right? And we looked at it, and you can see last year and this year, 49% have over 20 years. So just stop right there. 50% of the world's population of payroll leaders have more than 20 years of experience. That means that in the next 10, they're likely close or going to retire, if we're talking best case scenario. If you go to the next band of 11 to 19 years, they're at 27%. So you're talking about nearly 80%, right? 78% of the world's population is, to your point, in that aging group that is headed towards retirement. And I bet it would look similar to most industries. But with payroll, we're not replacing them the way we were. And so I think, again, this idea that AI is going to replace payroll and HR is insane. We're going to need human emotional intelligence to be governing over this work. And sure, there's going to be agents doing all of the work for us and surfacing that back so that payroll and HR can go be the strategic leaders they should be. But I think this is the beauty of technology. The infusion of technology is helping alleviate a lot of that, but also managed services and solutions that are there to help. And I love the modularity of those solutions, right? With payroll and EOR, to be able to plug and play as and when the employer needs it and solve for those areas where they don't have a strength or they've lost the capability and they need to supplement that. And I think that capability loss is going to start to accelerate faster and faster from many of these companies if they don't begin to look at succession planning for their payroll teams. And thankfully, many are. I've interviewed a few that are doing really good jobs of getting ready for this, but we do have an issue of the world's talent for payroll and HR waning, and we've got to do something about that. So
I was just talking to another payroll leader about this topic around AI and automation, and I think the challenge that's going to happen is I will push back a little bit. There's a possibility you could automate all this, But you got to be okay with it making mistakes.
Yeah, the processing part, but not necessarily like think about a merger and acquisition. Someone's got to govern that project, that program, right? You can have the AI doing the work. Yeah, totally agree. But the actual like human intelligence of deciding and negotiating,
Who's accountable?
who's going to be accountable for that, right? I think you're absolutely right.
I think that's going to be the really interesting thing is like, will there be people comfortable to let the accountability just not be there?
Right. That's the hard part for people.
Because then you'll save a lot of money, but you'll make mistakes, and that's the trade-off, I think.
It's a huge trust factor here.
Yeah.
Right. Payroll's got to be able to look at this and go, yeah, that looks right. That smells right. That sounds right. And I think that's going to be our world, right? Figuring out when to inject a human. Anyway, and I think payroll and HR, there's probably going to be a lot more hands-on monitoring because the consequences of this are massive, right? If something, one thing could go wrong, could be to your point, right? Overtime rules or any of these compliance rules could rattle an organization just because of one little.
Yeah, and then they're made punitive and interest and all.
Yes, so now your reputation is wrecked. That's sometimes harder to get over too. So
I guess kind of talk about technology a little bit. Like, how are you seeing technology? I know you've been saying that it's a little behind for payroll, but how do you see technology changing payroll? What do you see as opportunities right now?
Well,
or even things that have already been put in place
over
the last few years?
Well, it's blasted forward in the last 10, right? I mean, payroll has come on par with almost anything out there, right? We've really caught it up. I think it's we're far better off than we were 10 years ago for sure. The problem I see is in HR, and this is the same with HR, is the adoption, right? Is it happening fast enough? Are people getting to those transformed states fast enough? I don't think they are. I'd like them to move faster personally. And I think that's something I think payroll and HR has to get over is, they've sometimes been gatekeepers to this change. And I think they have to get over that and say, look, how do we lean into these things and start looking at things like AI and integrations and data as a way to reset how we've done it in the past? How do we want it to be? And reset that around a construct that is compliance driven, employee experience driven, and outcomes driven versus necessarily a process driven. And so I think the infusion of tech has just been a blessing for payroll, blessing for HR, but I would really love to see more of an engagement by the C-suites to bring them in and say, let's figure out how to put you in this technology and your athleticism as business leaders to work for us and help us, be more like strategic advisors to it. Be a Deloitte to us or a KPMG or whatever, Big Four. And have that in your house to go knock on the door and go, hey, what are you thinking here? I'm thinking about doing this. Bouncing that off these compliance experts in a forum is just amazing. But I don't know that everybody's doing that with HR and payroll. I think it's more arm's length of a handoff. Go do this, go do that. Man, collaborative, help us figure this out as advisors. That's what I think you need.
Okay, got it. And so I guess like I have one other question, and then I'll give you like a closing piece.
Okay.
But what's your ideal payroll HR experience? What does that look like? What does the setup look like theoretically or technology wise? Any way you want to frame it. What would be the ideal?
I think what's ideal is when and look, it doesn't matter where payroll reports. It's about where payroll is engaged and when. And so it's going to depend on what the organization's culture is. Is it finance led? Is it HR led? Whatever. What I would say is it's about when payroll's engaged, right? Give payroll the tools and the technology to be as on par as any other thing in your business, right? Give them that and let them show you how their data can power insight, right? Let them show you how it can power agility. And I think that when that happens and you match that tech investment, here's something we test in my research. We ask about executive investment, dollars on the table, and how invested they are. Because there's a difference, right? It's one thing for you to throw money at you, they'll go buy something, go deal with it, which is only part of the battle, but are they actually invested in you performing at the highest level? So what I would love to see is payroll, a center of expertise, a strategic advisor to the business that is tightly integrated with HR, tightly integrated with the business strategy, and working together as a cohesive team to tackle things versus throwing things over the wall at payroll and saying, here, go figure it out. We bought this 90 days, go get it onboarded. I've been there. And
of course. Yeah.
And it's like, but that why wasn't payroll at the table the first time, right? Having that conversation, helping them make good decisions about what to do. So what I want to see is a more collaborative, infused payroll in the moment, right? And payroll being able to exercise and stretch their legs as athletes by having the weight of no technology and no support taken off their neck and let them go and run and do great things, and I think they will. They're phenomenal leaders set up for the future.
Yeah, I really would second you on getting payroll in earlier.
Yeah.
I've been on so many enterprise and mid-market deals where payroll's not even in the room.
Oh yeah,
And it's crazy. And they're taking a demo of payroll and they go, oh, we don't need to see this. And they go and purchase the product.
yeah.
So, and then they
Happens all the
come up
time.
later, right? In implementation, that's when you see the profits of payroll. I think for me, like the ideal situation is like, are you paying people for the work they do? Do they feel the trust and purpose they need to? And I think just facilitating the right engagement and facilitating the right access to pay are like two of the big ways to do that. And obviously benefits is a big piece, especially in the United States where there's less social programs and stuff. So I think there's a lot of work to do, but I also would say, guys, you need to look at your metrics around retention, around your requisition times. I think it tells a lot about how you're approaching your pay and equity and how everything's working there. And I guess for a concluding thought though, what would be a takeaways that you would give to the audience here about, payroll and approaching payroll from a global standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you have to understand taking on global payroll is like anything, right? It's one size does not fit all, right? You can't necessarily what worked in one country is not going to work in another. You got to respect that each of those countries has very unique rules and very unique operating requirements, cultural requirements. Like Africa, we were talking about, in some countries, you got to walk down the road and drop off something in wet ink, right? Paperwork. So there's these last mile considerations. And I don't know that when businesses go off and start to grow into these places that they think about that. They think of it in the lens and the context of wherever they're starting from, whether that's America, whether that's whatever. And I think that the thing to understand is that, there's plenty of tech to help you. There's plenty of expertise out there to help you. And there are companies that are doing this as a business, right? Payroll is their business. And I think that the beauty of being able to go out and modularly buy what you need when you need it, that's a beautiful thing. And so what I would say to executives is there's often been this fear over the years of like, well, if payroll isn't broken, don't fix it, right? Let's just, and that comes in from ignorance, just not knowing what payroll actually does and how important it is. Instead of investing in it and fortifying it. And so what I would say is get to understand it, right? Start to understand its data, understand how it ticks and how it works, and figure out the modularity and the beauty of today's solutions, the extensibility of it is you can retain investments. If you're good at processing payroll in America, but you're not in the UK or you are in somewhere else, or you've bought something that you want to retain, you want to integrate, and that's possible, right? And so I think it's the idea of rip and replace is not necessary. There's an opportunity for you to go out and solve and put payroll in the best position possible. Give them those tires and give them the opportunity to deliver the org agility that they can deliver that I don't know that a lot of companies are seeing. And those that are turning it into a competitive advantage. They really are, I think, with talent, with compliance, with de-risking their path, right? That's a huge, like if I'm a CEO and I know that if I'm going to go down this road or nothing's going to take me out, I'm going to move a lot faster and be able to move with a lot more confidence. And I think that's something that payroll and HR can provide is that infrastructure of confidence that we can move with the people we need or the whatever to enable. And we can do it without having to feel like we're oh no, looking over our shoulder, so to speak, right? Which can completely derail your brand, your ambitions, all of it. If you have a misstep for something as small as a wage and hour violation or a pay equity violation, and so I think that complexity, right, is really what people need to take seriously and understand that takes more than just tech. It takes expertise and it takes knowledge and boots on the ground and years of operating in those spaces, and that's very, 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 very important. So.
Yeah, and just to tie back to something you said earlier, no matter the complexity, everyone wants to be paid at the end of the day. They all have the same expectations. So, yeah, I definitely appreciate your time today, Pete. Definitely check out his podcast and any of his writings that are out there. My name is Michael. Again, I appreciate you joining us. And again, if you need any help with any of your global employment needs, whether it's contractor of record, contractor pay, global payroll, or EOR, definitely give a look over at Multiplier. Thanks so much. See you.